Welcome once again. GS, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us once again. Today I'm presenting the December 2025 Prime Building Cost Index, also known as the PBCI, and the latest inflation figures for the building and construction sector. This release is important because, as we know, building costs affect all of us. They affect housing affordability, they affect our rent levels, government infrastructure spending, and the cost of doing business in the construction industry. So whether you're a household planning to build, a contractor pricing a project, a business expanding operations, or a government agency delivering roads, schools, hospitals, these numbers matter. Today, I'll explain what the PBCI is, what the related inflation numbers are telling us, and what is driving the changes in the building costs, and what practical actions we can take based on the evidence that we'll be showing. In this release, we'll cover 5 main areas. First, we'll look at the definitions and measurements, so everyone understands what we are measuring. Second, inflation highlights, which are the headline figures that we'll go through. Third, we'll look at price drivers, meaning what is pushing costs up or down. Fourth, we'll look at some key takeaways, which summarize the numbers and what they mean. And then fifth, we'll look at some recommendations, which translate the data into practical actions. Let's start with the basics. The Prime Building Cost Index, or PBI for short, measures how the overall cost of constructing buildings changes over time. It tracks the prices of key inputs such as building materials like cement, iron rod, sand, and paint. Labor, meaning the cost of skilled and unskilled workers, as well as plant, which refers to equipment and machinery used in the construction sector. In simple terms, the PBCI tells us one clear thing. Is it becoming more expensive or cheaper to build compared to a previous period? And this is useful for many groups, including investors, developers, contractors, policymakers, and households. It helps people negotiate contracts, adjust bids, plan budgets, and monitor inflation trends in the construction sector. Now let me explain how we measure it. The PBCI is measured monthly using prices collected for 406 items from 16 markets and 489 outlets across the country. These items are organized into 3 groups, and the groups are materials, labor, and plant. And these groups are further classified into 23 subgroups. The index uses 2023 as a base year, meaning reference point is 2023 with an index of 100. So when the index is above 100, it means costs have increased compared to 2023. When it is below 100, it means costs are lower than the 2023 average. Let's also clarify the key inflation terms. As usual, when we say year-on-year inflation, we mean how prices changed this month compared to the same month last year. So December 2025 year-on-year inflation compares December 2025 to December 2024. When we say month-on-month inflation, we mean how prices changed this month compared to the previous month. So December 2025 month-on-month inflation compares December 2025 to November 2025. We also refer to end-of-period inflation, which is the inflation rate at a particular point in time, like the end of the month. And we sometimes report the annual average inflation, which helps us understand the general price movements across the year. Ladies and gentlemen, there's been some recent innovations to the PBCI release. We now report annual average inflation data to complement the end-of-period inflation. We also report contributions to inflation so we can identify what is driving the changes. And we provide infographics to make the information easier to understand and more accessible. Most importantly, we include a clear section on recommendations so that data can support practical decision-making. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about what has changed in the rebase series. We did a rebasing of the PBCI. The new PBCI has a new base year, which is 2023, compared to the previous one, which was using 1997 as a base year. Secondly, in the new rebased PBCI, we're actually tracking the movement of 406 items, compared to the previous one where we were tracking only 37 items. Thirdly, we have now grouped the subgroups into 23, compared to our previous 11 subgroups. And finally, but not the least, data is collected monthly, and we disseminate monthly as well. Previously, we were collecting data quarterly, and then we're disseminating quarterly. So you can see that there's an enhancement in our collection and dissemination of PBCI data. I must also say that currently, we're able to cover 4 building models, including both residential and non-residential structures, against previously 1 building model that we were using. Now, these 4 building models include single-story 4-bedroom house, a 4-story hostel facility, a single-story 6-unit classroom block, and a 5-story office block. This new series provides a much stronger, more accurate, and more current picture of construction cost movements. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's move to the headline results of Building Cost Index and Inflation for December 2025. The Prime Building Cost Index for December 2025 was 131.0, up from 125.5 in December 2024. This translates into a year-on-year inflation rate of 4.4% for December 2025 for the building industry. In plain language, this means, on the average, building input prices were 4.4% higher in December 2025 than they were in December 2024. Now, on a month-on-month basis, inflation was negative 0.2%. What does that mean? This means that between November and December 2025, building input prices fell by 0.2%. This is a key message for the construction sector. And what is the message? We are seeing price stability, and even as a small reduction in overall monthly building cost, but over the period, we are seeing that prices are becoming very stable. Let me place the December building inflation figure into the proper context. The December 2025 year-on-year inflation of 4.4% marks the 8th consecutive drop in year-on-year inflation. It is also a 1.5 percentage point decline from the November 2025 inflation rate of 5.9% for the industry. And it represents an 18.2 percentage points decline from the previous year's building inflation of 22.6%. So what does this mean? It means that The strong price pressures we experienced the previous year have reduced significantly, and the construction sector is experiencing a much calmer inflation environment. Now, let's break the overall inflation into the three major groups I mentioned earlier, namely labor, materials, and plant. Let's start with labor. In December 2025, year-on-year labor inflation fell to 10.7%, down from 12.7% in November 2025 and 21.3% in December 2024. That is a clear decline. On a month-on-month basis, labor prices decreased by 0.9% between November and December 2025. So labor costs are still rising year on year, meaning they are higher than last year. But in the short term, from November to December 2025, labor costs actually eased. This tells us that labor market in construction remains an area to watch, especially because labor inflation is still higher than the overall inflation rate. Let's now look at materials, which is often the biggest cost driver in building projects. In December 2025, year-on-year material inflation eased to 2.7%, down from 4.2% in November and 23.5% a year earlier. On a month-on-month basis, material prices decreased slightly by 0.1% between November and December 2025. This is a very important signal. It suggests that material prices are stabilizing, and the intense price increases that households and contractors experience in previous periods are not as strong now. For many builders, this can improve planning and budgeting. Now, let's look at plant, meaning equipment and machinery. For plant, year-on-year inflation rose to 5.6% in December 2025, up from 5.3% in November 2025. And on a month-on-month basis, plant prices increased by 1.5% between November and December 2025. This is where we see a different story. While overall inflation declined and materials eased, plant costs moved upwards. This matters because plant costs affect contractors, roadworks, and large-scale infrastructure projects that depend heavily on machinery and equipment. Now let's look at the disparities across labor, materials, and plants. Now, if we pause and we reflect on the disparities, we see that while overall inflation is 4.4% year on year, we see that the month-on-month inflation is negative 0.2%. But within that overall figure, labor inflation is 10.7% year on year and negative 0.9% month on month. Material inflation is 2.7% year on year and negative 0.1% month on month. We also see that plant inflation is 5.6% year on year and positive 1.5% month on month. So from the December 2025 data, the construction sector is not moving in one direction uniformly. Materials are easing, as we can see. Labor is still relatively high year on year, but it is falling month on month in terms of labor prices. And plant is rising, both year on year and month on month. This tells us that even when overall inflation slows, some cost pressures remain active, especially in equipment and specialized services. Now let's go a bit deeper so that we can look at the subgroups under each of the groups. Once we do that, we are able to understand what is happening at the subgroup level. In December 2025, the subgroup with the highest inflation was equipment, with 14.9% inflation. This means that equipment cost was 14.9% higher than they were in December 2024. And the subgroup with the lowest inflation was reinforcement, with negative 7.3% inflation. This means that reinforcement costs were 7.3% lower than they were in December 2024. So within the construction basket, some areas are rising strongly, while others are declining. Other subgroups that witnessed cost reductions, in addition to reinforcement, include toilet accessories, where we saw a cost reduction of 0.4%. Plumbing, where we saw a cost reduction of 0.5%. Roofing sheets, we saw a cost reduction of 1.9%. Burglar proofing, cost reduction of 3.8%. Cement, cost reduction of 5.1%. And small tools, cost reduction of 2.7%. But there are also subgroups that witness cost increases. And this includes timber, which saw a cost increase of 9.6%. Surface finishes, 8.1% cost increase. Steel, 7.3% cost increase. Door, 7.1% cost increase. Tiles, 6.6%. Skilled labor, 11% cost increase. Unskilled labor, 10.1% cost increase. And equipment, 14.9% cost increase. And this is exactly why we produce subgroup analysis, because it helps decision makers target the real drivers. This is important because even if the overall prime building cost inflation is low, which is, we are talking about 4.4%, a contractor may still face pressures if the items they use most belong to a high inflation subgroup. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's now look at the contributors to the December 2025 building inflation. When we say contribution to inflation, we mean which subgroups are adding the most to the overall inflation rate. This is crucial because inflation is not only about which prices are high, but also about which items matter most in the construction basket. Some items may have high inflation, but contribute less because they are a smaller part of the overall building cost. This approach strengthens transparency and supports better decision making because we can clearly identify where policy attention should go. Now, the top 5 subgroups that contributed the most to inflation are steel, which contributed 32.9%, skilled labor, which contributed 30.5%, unskilled labor, 16.7%, tiles, 12.4%, and equipment, 6.2%. Altogether, these 5 items contributed 98.7% to the overall inflation of 4.4% in the building industry. Ladies and gentlemen, so the same, let's look at the top 10 high inflation and bottom 10 low inflation subgroups in the building industry. From the presentation, the summary of the top 10 subgroups with the highest inflation and lowest inflation are shown. Now let's look at among the top 10 high inflation subgroups, let's look at the first 5. The first 5 are equipment, 14.9%, skilled labor, 11%, unskilled labor, 10.1%, timber, 9.6%, and surface finishes, 8.1%. If you put these 5 items together, they contributed 59% to the overall inflation of 4.4%. We also have the bottom 10 low inflation subgroups, altogether pulling inflation down by 17.6%. 3.9%. Now, the lowest 5 items are reinforcements, which actually saw price reduction of 7.3%, cement, which saw a price reduction of 5.1%, burglar proofing, which saw a price reduction of 3.9%, small tools 2.7%, and roofing sheet price reduction of 1.9%. Now, these 5 subgroups dragged overall building inflation down by 18.4%. In plain terms, these low negative inflation subgroups are helping to pull overall inflation down. This is part of the reason why the overall inflation rate has continued to decline over several months. What matters for decision making is that inflation is not being driven evenly. It is concentrated in certain parts of the construction basket. Ladies and gentlemen, let me now summarize the key takeaways from today's release. First, building construction inflation declined to 4.4% in December 2025, down from 5.9% in December 2025. Second, overall building input prices decreased by 0.2% month on month, meaning costs fell slightly between November and December 2025. Third, year-on-year labor inflation remains the highest among the 3 major groups. Labor inflation fell to 10.7% year-on-year in December 2025 from 12.7% in November and declined by 0.9% month on month. Fourth, materials inflation eased further to 2.7% year-on-year in December 2025 from 4.2% in November and declined 0.1% month on month. Fifth, plant inflation increased to 5.6% year-on-year in December 2025 from 5.3% in November and increased 1.5% month on month. And finally, but not the least, at the subgroup level, equipment recorded the highest inflation at 14.9%, while reinforcement recorded the lowest inflation at negative 7.3%. So the key message is that overall inflation is easing, but pressures remain uneven, with plant and labor so important areas to watch. Now, based on the data, what should we do? For government, this is a good time to spend strategically and fast-track key infrastructure projects, including the big push, while targeting the top drivers. The persistent labor inflation suggests a skills gap, so expanding training for artisans is important. For businesses, we advise you to lock in today's prices and secure medium-term contracts while inflation is low before any potential rebound. For households, with material prices stabilizing, it may be a good time to start or resume your building projects. And you can face your work to benefit from the reducing cost pressures. Ladies and gentlemen, for those who want deeper detail, the Ghana Statistical Service has also provided supporting materials, including the PowerPoint presentation which we have presented today, the December 2025 PBCI bulletin and annexes, and infographics to make the results easier to understand. We've placed all of these, or we are going to place all of these immediately after this release on our website, which you can access. So we encourage researchers, journalists, policymakers, players in the building industry, and industry to use these resources for analysis and planning. Before I close, ladies and gentlemen, let me share our appreciation. We sincerely thank all our key stakeholders, especially the market players, the market readers, who support data collection across the country. We also thank our media colleagues who help us disseminate our statistical information. And I want to recognize the hardworking staff of the Ghana Statistical Service whose professionalism, dedication, and discipline make this work possible month after month. Your contribution is helping Ghana make better decisions with better data. Finally, let me reaffirm our commitment as the Ghana Statistical Service. We remain fully committed to producing statistics that are timely, accurate, relevant, credible, and trustworthy to support evidence-based decision-making and national development. We'll continue to strengthen our methods, improve our coverage, and communicate our results more clearly so that every Ghanaian can understand what the data means for their daily life. Thank you for your attention and your continued trust in Ghana Statistical Service. Thank you. We're in them. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Alasa, for Yusuf for the presentation. We are grateful. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have received the December Prime Building Cost Index and inflation. I want to give opportunities to you. If you have any question, you ask. If you have any clarification that you need, let us know so that we'll provide the needed answers to you. So the floor is open. If you have any question, please raise your hand and the mic.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mention your name and the media house.
All right. So my name is Ajona Mensah. I report for fmnewsonline.com. Doc, thank you so much.
Yes.
First, I would like to understand when you mean or when you say you collected data from 16 markets. I want to understand what do you mean by the market, because we know building materials are not essentially sold in the normal market that we all know, like tomatoes and the rest. You can get them from the shop. So is it the case that you just trying to define the collecting point as a market, and then if you say 16 market, you mean it is regionally balanced in
Yes.
all the regional level? Yes.
All right.
But then again, one issue is that those who are building, we know the cost and we know how the cost is coming down. But what is your expectation in terms of government project? Does it mean that the government project, for instance, roads, high building, and others, the cost of those structure will come down? Is that the expectation based on the data that we are seeing today?
Okay. Let's take some more.
Thank you very much. My name is Winston Taki of Joy Business. Look, that's fantastic data, and I want to understand from you whether this particular depreciation we are seeing, will it in any way subsequently reflect in the reduction in the price of rent? And how is it and also because we know there are certain prime buildings in the cities, and it appears the conversation of affordability has come to light. Are we to see any policy direction in that light into the latter part of the year, possibly?
So your last question again, I didn't get
Like
that.
there are many prime buildings in the cities,
Okay.
and we keep talking about affordable housing.
Affordable housing,
Yes,
right.
and
Okay.
how is it interlinked in terms of we experiencing drop in prices, especially in costs of ownership?
Okay.
Do you have any other question? Okay, so I don't see any hand up.
Echo, I knew you would take the mic.
Of course. I stand behind me too.
All right.
Okay, my name is Eko from
Yes.
Bloomberg.
Okay.
Doc, I have a few, but I'll take it one after the other and
That's
answer,
fine.
and then if I have, I'll come
Yeah.
back.
Okay.
I was thinking about this monthly release, especially for this, given
Yeah.
that for contractual terms, negotiations take time.
Yeah.
So, think you not that if we were to be releasing this on a quarterly basis, would have smoothed out these spikes that we see on a monthly basis and give a better guide for planning purposes, so that if you can say that we can still have this the monthly though, but then we release it quarterly, the average, to give a guide, especially against the backdrop that the monthly may have a lot of spikes. So by the time one negotiation is ended till we are procuring the contract, there will be variations again, so that a quarterly release would have been a bit more smoother for decision making. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay.
And there's some point you made about labor, falling labor prices.
Yeah.
That may not necessarily mean that labor is being paid less for doing maybe the same, if not more. Could that be because of the status of the currency, that the currency is strengthened, and so therefore, even if labor was receiving the same, the net effect may have a bit of a tweak because of the dollar position? And given that this industry is almost like dollar indexed, because everything is only imported or dollarized. So how do you marry these two? I have two others, but after this I'll take it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Yes.
Calvin Powell, GH1 TV.
Okay.
Mine is kind of confusion. I just need a clarification on it. So, Doc, before the presentation, you made mention that year on year means from one year to the other year.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing year on year here.
Yeah.
Overall, November, December, the same year, 2025. I don't know if.
Where? What do you mean where? In the.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's still correct.
You mean in the infographics? Okay. Okay. So you want more clarity on the year-on-year, month-on-month? I'll explain that. Don't worry. Yeah. Okay. Which one is it again? This year-on-year. Okay. Okay. I'll explain that. Don't worry. Yeah. It's okay. Yeah. Any more before we take the? Yes.
My name is Apostle Jakuma and I work with
Adam TV. Okay. Hey, she again. I hear you. All right. Okay. So good news is okay. Kingsley, we have to hear your voice today, right?
Yeah. My concern is on the
Yes.
timber.
Timber.
Yeah,
Yes,
we know
okay.
we have seen stability over the past year
Yes.
where prices are down. Timber is sourced locally.
Yeah.
So I'm curious why the prices keeps on
Okay.
increasing. If you can share some insights with us.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have any more? Oh, you're good. Okay. So I'll provide the initial responses. My team is available here, and then they'll come in to fill in. So first one, you needed a clarification on the market. We said, if you could show the slide. When we're talking about the definitions and measurements, we mentioned that one of the things is that we've extended the number of items to what? 406? Yes. And then we also said that we are collecting data from 60 markets with 489 outlets. You remember that, right? So his question is, when we say 16 markets, what do we mean? Okay, so it basically means that we collect from all the 16 regions. Okay. Then the second question is the impact of these inflation figures we have released in the building industry on government projects. Okay, so that's a good question. the question is whether it means that the cost of building, the cost of government projects, like the infrastructure projects, other things being equal, will come down because of the inflation coming down. So, first of all, I need to explain the meaning of inflation. And please, let's listen to this very attentively. And I'm going to take my time to explain it. Because I happened to listen to, I think Joy, you had a program yesterday night. And when I listened to it, I realized that some of the interpretations that were given to inflation figures by some of the people you hosted, I realized that there wasn't a good understanding of what inflation numbers were. I think the host did very well. He tried to clarify what it means, and I was very happy about that. He really did a lot of good job for us. So when we say inflation, okay, inflation basically is a rate at which the general price level is what? Is rising, right? Or in fact, falling. But there are technical terms. Anytime you see inflation being positive, like when we released our consumer price index in December, we said it was what? 5.4%. That's a positive figure. So the 5.4, I'll come to the building now. I'm going back to consumer price inflation. So the 5.4% means that the general price level in December 2025 actually increased, not fall, right? Increased by what? 5.5%. Sorry, 5.4% compared to what? To the previous year, which is December 2024. That's what it means. And it's an average figure. If you put all the price movements together, that's the direction you see. So that is not saying that prices have reduced by what? 5.4%. No. The rate of increase is still positive, which is what? 5.4. In other words, prices have what? Increased.
At a slower pace.
By what? 5.4%. But if you compare the 5.4% to the previous year, which was December 2024, which was 23.8%, then you see that the rate has what? Really slowed. So there's a price increase in both cases, but the price increase in December 2025 is way much lower than the price increase in December 2024. So any inflation figure that is positive, and please listen carefully, anytime you see any inflation figure that is positive, it means that prices are what? Rising, not falling. When you see inflation figure, which is negative, the technical term there is what? Deflation. And that means that prices are what? Falling. So the question you ask, we have prime building cost index, which has thrown out an inflation rate of 4.4%. Positive, right? For December 2025. That 4.4% positive building inflation for December 2025 means that prices of building inputs increased, not fall. The prices didn't fall, but the prices increased by what? 4.4% in December 2025. But if you compare that to what obtained in the same period last year, which is December 2024, where we registered inflation, building inflation of what? 22.6%, then that's what? A drastic reduction in what? The inflation, not the prices. So in both cases, you have building input prices what? Rising. In both cases, they are rising. But in the case of December 2025, the increase is only what? 4.4%. And in December 2024, it was what? 22.6%. So we've seen a very big disinflation. That's what we call disinflation. When you see inflation positive, but it's what? Falling. We say it's what? Disinflation. You get the point I'm making? Now, the implications on the government projects, that's a very good question. So all other things being equal, because we've seen the inflation coming down, it means that it will have an easing effect on government building projects. It doesn't mean that the cost of the building projects would reduce, but the rate at which that cost is increasing would what? Slowed very considerably. So that's what it means. I took my time to explain this because I want the general public to understand the basics. So if you look at the style that has been adopted by the Ghana Statistical Service, usually when we are disseminating our statistical products, we make sure that we bring the interpretation to the understanding of the common person so that we can all appreciate what they mean and we can use them for decision making. Now, the third question, Joy, I think your question was on the recent appreciation that. Sorry, it's a depreciation, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And impact on rent due to the difference, the drop in cost of inputs, basically.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
So, again, I'll come there. But there was a question that was asked, somebody asked about month on month. Let me pick that before I come because it's related.
I did.
Oh, you did? Very good. So if you check the data we just released, so even though we saw year-on-year inflation for December was what? 4.4%. Then we also said that month-on-month was what? Negative 2%.
Correct.
And so I think I should complete the picture by explaining that. So again, we've seen an inflation figure that's what? Negative. So year on year, we are comparing the December 2025 to December what? 2024. And that's 4.4%, meaning that the general price level actually, or prices, or the average prices what? Increased by 4.4%. But if you take month on month, meaning the two successive months, which is December 2025 and November 2025, inflation there was what? Negative 0.2. Meaning that the prices of building inputs actually reduced by what? 0.2%. So anytime you have negative, it means that it is what? Price reduction. But when you have positive, it's what? Price increase. The difference between the year-on-year and month-on-month is that the month-on-month gives you the short-term effects of price movements, while the year-on-year gives you a relatively longer term effect. Now, back to your question with regards to the impact on rent. I think that's the question you asked, impact on rent, yes. So, I mean, when you're going to rent a building, whether it's an individual who is going to rent a building or it's an institution that's going to rent a building, you rent it over a period of time, right? Possibly maybe a 1 year period, 2 year period, etc. And there's definitely some form of agreement surrounding it. So once you negotiate and you rent the property for a period of time, those agreements, those terms are locked in. So for that period, it is locked in. But it is still important to monitor these price movements that we release, whether in terms of the prices themselves or in terms of the rate at which they are increasing or decreasing. It's still important because definitely when you rent, there will definitely be a period where the rent period would expire and you may have to do what? Renew. So with this information, you are better placed to have more information about the industry to inform your negotiation, whether in fact you are the landlord or you are the what? The tenant. So to that extent, the figures we are releasing would then definitely be beneficial to the players in the industry. And then there's a question Echo asks whether it would not be more appropriate to release this series on a more quarterly basis rather than monthly basis because of the swings it may generate. My immediate answer to you, Eko, is that it's always better to have more frequent information to make decisions, whether you're a household or government or any other stakeholder, than to wait for the next 3 months, to make that decision. And so once we're able to provide the monthly information, I think it aids better decision making. And then there was a question on labor prices. So first of all, you said falling labor prices. No, it is falling labor inflation. So if you check the data we showed that labor inflation has actually reduced from 12.7 in November to 10.7 in December. So yes, there's a reduction in labor inflation. But labor inflation is still 10.7, which is high. And the reason why we're able to say high or is not high or low, etc., you have to compare it to what? The average inflation. We've just reported that the building inflation nationally is what? 4.4. If you have a component that's recording inflation above that average, then it is high. If you have a component that's reporting inflation below that national average, then relatively it is what? Low. So relative terms, yes, it is good that labor inflation is coming down. In fact, if you check the graph, you see that it's been coming down for some time. But it is still 10.7%, meaning that labor prices increased by 10.7% between December 2024 and December 2025. That's what it means.
So if you can
Yes.
explain it well,
Yeah.
the appreciation of the currency,
The impact.
which is negating the effect in the labor, because the masons and the laborers, they have not reduced their
Okay,
charges.
so let me.
They still take the same rate.
Oh, okay. So let me explain that. Remember, we are comparing to last year, right? So last year, in the masons and laborers that we are talking about, and by the way, we're able to distinguish between skilled labor and unskilled labor. But even if you make that distinction, they're still within the 11 to 10, right? So it's still relatively high compared to the average of 4.4. First of all other things being equal, we know that labor prices, or usually wages, are very sticky downwards. Usually. I mean, we know market conditions. And so usually when market conditions, demand and supply comes to play, depending upon, the demand and supply factors, you can see prices coming down, going up, etc. But when it comes to labor market, as we've learned, the labor prices, wages are usually very sticky downwards for a number of reasons. And so if you took last year, 2024, December, and you took, last 2 years, 2024, December, and last year, 2025, December, we can't say that the labor prices on the average were the same. They would have changed. And that's the 10.7 you see here. So we are saying that whatever wages or labor payments we're making to whether laborers or masons or whatever, on the average, that has increased by what? 10.7%. And then there was a question on month on month, year on year. That's your question. I think it's been clarified, right?
So what I
Yes.
was trying to say is that
Yeah.
you said year on year, you are
Yes.
comparing a year, for
Yes.
example, 2024 to 2025.
Yeah.
So if we said December 2025, building inflation is 4.4%, what is the figure for December 2024?
That's 26. That's the, sorry. If you go to the, please check the.
Oh, okay.
So December 2024 was 22.6%. Yeah. Check the second. Yeah, 22.6%. Oh, no, if you can, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so you're clear now, right? Uh-huh. Exactly. So that's why we said that if you take December 2024 and you take December 2025, inflation actually reduced by 18.2 percentage points. That's from 22.6% in December 2024 to now 4.4% in December 2025. Okay. All right. Then there was another question on timber. So I think the question is, if timber is locally sourced, how come the inflation for timber is still high? So basically, so two things I would say. So these are prices we've collected on these building items. And it shows that timber inflation is what? Is high at, what was the inflation for timber? That's what, 9.6%? Yes, meaning that timber prices increased by 9.6% between December 2024 and December 2025. That's what it means. But as we know, yes, they are sourced locally, but it also depends on what demand and supply. It depends on the volume of timber that is made available in the market and the demand that for timber for that period. So all of those factors would work together to determine the price. That's one. Secondly, timber definitely goes through some processing. Also, there are some input costs, and there are a number of factors. Even though it's sourced locally, and your exchange rate determines foreign prices and and all that. For all you know, maybe the inputs that you use, some of them are foreign sourced, and so therefore the exchange rate movements may impact in there as well. Meaning that if, for example, we didn't see appreciation of the cedi in 2025, right, and there were some inputs in timber processing, we would have probably seen some higher inflation figures, all other things being equal. Yes, transportation costs and all that, all of those could be inputs that are influencing and electricity, influencing the timber prices. Any more questions?
Speak for yourself. Doc.
Yes, you talked about tree, right? Just a 1 minute summary of tree.
Doc, let me finish my English, then you can have the tree. Doc, I want to go back to the model, the housing models you use to extrapolate this figure. Good. Item 4, you go that 4 different models and blah blah. A single-story 4-bedroom house, 4-story hostel accommodation, single-story 6-unit classroom block, 5.
The models.
Look, in my mind, I think you are missing these prototypes you have used as missing out a very key factor.
Yeah.
The most popular buildings we have here are what we call the single room.
Single rooms. Okay.
Self-contains, and that is where the average Ghanaian looks for because of its cost and its affordability.
Okay.
And we look at when we look at slum areas, where we have been compound houses, the house just everybody's in one room. I don't see that factored somewhere in here.
Okay.
And then if I have to bring like slum communities and their makeshift structures and water views, where do they fit in the scheme of things? And then my final question is, the last time I asked a similar thing, but to what extent are you able to report back that stakeholders are really using this data, especially government, the procurement of contract, given that the big push is up and a few other projects also are coming up? Underlined by the fact that after the DDEP, a lot of the stalled projects are going to come back on stream. To what extent has this important data informed or informing that work? And can you report back on that? Thank you.
Okay. So Mr. Andani will take the question on the building models. So the question basically is why don't we have single units covered in the 4?
Thank you very much.
Yes, yeah, okay. Sorry?
Okay.
Okay. Oh, Francis, you have... Okay.
Good morning.
Then we'll take all. Okay, all right.
So, Doc, you've seen a disinflation of 5.1% in December 2025. On month-on-month basis, so there's a disinflation of 3.3%. At what... For cement.
You're talking about cement?
Yes, cement. Yes. We have 5.1 disinflation for December 2025. November there was a disinflation of 3.3. It means there's some improvement. I wanted to know the figure for 2024 to know whether there's still some sort of disinflation or yeah. Because we don't have the 2024 figures
Okay,
here.
so you're looking for
The
2024
20.
figures for cement, right? Okay. Yeah. Okay. But just to, for purposes of education, so Francis, so when you see a negative inflation figure, it's not disinflation, it's deflation. So I just want us to be on the same page. So we'll provide you with the 2024 as soon as they get the information. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
If you look at the 2021 population and housing census, we have more of our population living in the slums and then the one bedroom, two bedroom apartment. But this is actually targeting building cost of materials in building. So if you look at that, the measurement that we had to use is more fitted or suitable for our purpose than just the 4 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, or just stand-alone apartment, because we are measuring the building cost of building in the materials that we use. That is what we are interested in measuring, and not the actual building on itself.
Okay.
You understand that?
Okay.
So the cost of building is what we are targeting.
In respect of what it is.
Yes.
Exactly.
So that's what we are doing. So,
And give standardization.
but we are not actually considering the population, because we are not dealing with the people. We are dealing with the cost of actually putting up a structure. So that's why we started with the first story school blocks with first floor with 3 offices, so that at least, because we are covering almost every aspect of the population. That is where people actually build. What we can use, contractors, government, and then other business enterprise, individuals. So that's what we are doing. Thank you very much.
Excellent. I think to add to what he said, the methodology is also following a standard methodology in the literature. You know, when we do these things, we have to do it in a way that we can compare to other countries. Initially, we have to follow the international standards, you know, that are used to compile the statistics. And per the international standards, we moved from our previous classification, which was just one model, to the 4 model. So that has given some improvement to the exercise that we are doing in this regard. Thank you.
Even after the rebasing too, so it's
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right.
Okay, so Francis, you wanted to find the inflation for cement
Yeah.
in December 2024. Yeah, so month on month, December 2024 was negative 0.4. That is if you compare November 2024 and December 2024.
Okay, that's a month.
Yeah, but on year, that is December 2023 against December 2024, the inflation was 54.7. 54.7.
54.7.
For cement.
Cement, yeah.
Yeah.
For cement.
Yeah.
And that is what we have now in
Minus 5.
deflation.
Minus 5.4 for December 2025. And minus 2.2.
You have caused me a diarrhea of questions and a constipation of answers. Mr. Mensah, are you there? So you are telling me that a year ago, right? Yes. A year ago, cement inflation was 54.7%. And now it is a deflation of 5.1. That's what you're saying?
Yes.
No, inflation was 154%, now it's 5.4, so it's okay. You just move the decimal point and bring it forward.
All right. So let's do the 1 minute tree. Usually when I say 1 minute tree, then there's 5 minutes, right?
Anybody doing tree, come and tree play.
No, we just do it immediately. I just okay. Me the one I say in the Ghana Sascal service, you share we are teaching in common offer building inflation. That is I am done ACC one prices means more call. Nanda ye twetwe no komo. Na edwuma ya ye for December 2025 trade building inflation for December 2025 and about 4.4%. Now, you compare November 2025, now them inflation here 5.9%. You compare December 2024, them time and inflation here 22.6%. In the building inflation, we perform by 18.2% between December 2024 to December 2025. Now, obi baby said them inflation ya waba for me as a cheden. On the chede December 2025, nzama yet to what are your buildings in? One price is cost for 4.4%. That's December 2025. But them 4.4% are yaking. Or your lower sin 2025 building inflation now. No ye 22.6% by 18.2 percentage points. Yehia nzama ibasa no affect them inflation results. That the means money ye labor aya amona building industry where labor works. When the building industry wo laborers ne wo masons etc. Where you may tell one cow. Anti them kana you tell one yehia one almost one inflation. That's labor inflation. Ne all materials no see in some way to the cement and iron rods na in some materials almost any inflation movements no or explain them 4.4 and then finally plant and equipment building you use cement mixer or a plant and any other equipment they use now December 2025 no you there labor inflation will perform to 10.7% in December 2025. In fact, November no at 12.7%. Now will perform to 10.7%. Now materials so will perform to 2.7%. November no at 4.2%, but will perform to 2.7% in December 2025. But you have planting, not planting inflation. Wako so to 5.6% from November now no yet 5.3%. Na yesha nzamana one inflation cost for papa na nzama so one inflation ba form yesha subgroup na inflation cost for pa reinforcement. No, the inflation cost by equipment. Equipment, so the inflation cost for up to 14.9% in December 2025. Nama, the inflation bar from reinforcement. The inflation was negative 7.3%. Now, we be said them inflation numbers yakin as a children. Yakade equipment inflation 14.9%. As I said, the prices of equipment in December 2025 was 14.9% higher than one prices in December 2024. For reinforcement, yes, inflation year negative 7.3. As I said, for reinforcement or building more. The cost of it above foam by 7.3%. They compare December 2024. Now, them usually we need figures in them. I my recommendations. It means my young day building inflation will above from 22.6% December 2024 to 4.4% in December 2025. Yeah, advise the households there. Since your material prices or stabilize, into say individuals, your project beer, this is the time. Or they them projects because even their prices now then or stabilize. So the cost on cost be today means man no cost previously. This will be the best time to continue those projects. But now your advice is today. Area so they yet me face a project in so that you bet him take advantage of the reducing costs. The businesses so I businesses I wanna where your construction and some. Your advice today, since your prices now, the inflation is performing. One take advantage. Now, one fan to talk. Nzama, what are your buildings? Because that on price no is stable. Since you are net on Nzama, your buildings since you are any advantage room, so that later price no cost won't affect you, baby. Now, government. The advice the government today. Since you are young there, material prices in perform. Even labor prices, young there, the inflation also perform. Plants, the inflation cost. But if your inflation figures now, also form kakra. This is the best time. All the government, the infrastructure projects are all build the building, or be more, so that we may take advantage of the low inflation we have in the building industry. But here also the labor inflation or a high kakra, even though we have a form, but a high kakra, because it's around 10%. Now, average inflation a year 4.4, which means labor inflation or high kakra. Now, usually say inflation and our price be a high. Now, a pede overformer, or they increase the supply of them in zaman and the price in the perform. Until say was skills gap be labor sector now. Or they now say mason so say I wanna painter so I wanna wage more construction that's you better improve. You better provide opportunity, you produce more of them so that the labor costs can also stabilize. That's the summary that we want to share with you. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Please, those of you who have the PowerPoint, do this correction for me so that if you are using it, you see on this one.
Oh, we just did it.
We just finished.
Yeah, we just finished.
So the third is government, not business.
Government, yes.
Number 3 is government. Yeah. Thank you. Paul, we finished the...
We just finished. I just did the key.
But they'll pick it from the Facebook.
Anna Francis, you can do a separate one for them.
No, it's actually
yeah. Yes, Lee. Sorry. Oh, question. Where's the man?
Oh, yeah, or down.
I know down. Let me at you.